It's been a deadly 24 hours in Lebanon, Matt. According to the Ministry of Health here, 60 dead, 168 injured. Now, that's across the country, and there may be more now because we're hearing that there is bombing underway in the Bekaa Valley even as I speak. Now, were any of those people from Hezbollah? Maybe, probably, but an awful lot of them were civilians. Israel would say that Hezbollah is using people as human shields. There may be some truth in that Hezbollah is now dispersed, certainly around Beirut. But what are you to do if you're an ordinary Lebanese civilian? You can't stop Hezbollah, you certainly can't stop Israel. This is what we found out when we went down to the site of one of the biggest bombs that has fallen on Beirut this morning.
In this place, in the moments before, what were people doing? Eating dinner, watching TV, putting the children to bed. Now their neighbours look on in shock. The bodies were removed last night. Dust, rubble and rebar, all that remains of homes in what people believed, hoped, was a safe part of the city.
The damage here is immense, and it's right in the centre of Beirut, which is the point, because Hezbollah members and officials have dispersed from their traditional areas now. And imagine the tension that that's creating. Who would want to host someone from Hezbollah, knowing that the Israelis are tracking and targeting them?
This morning, those whose apartment walls had been sheared away like the front of a doll's house were seeing what they could salvage. The Israelis knew who they were trying to hit and thought that the lives of those who happened to be nearby were a price worth paying, a necessary sacrifice, collateral damage, all the euphemisms that cover the killing of innocent people and the destruction of their homes.
ثواني لمعت الدنيا كهرباء كأنه صاروخ انسمع صوته انفجر يعني صوت قد مرق علينا مثل هالصوت ما مرق صوت امي صوت بيي عييط صريخ جار ما لا يوصف لا يوصف شعور لا يوصف سلطان لا يوصف.
I'm sorry. Very hard.
شو في ما بعرف ما بعرف شو في هون ظلمونا.
The Israelis are always here.
I can hear the drone. Can you see it?
Now you cannot see it anymore.
But you could see the drone before.
Yeah, I see it.
People are leaving what many had hoped would itself be a refuge. A quarter of Lebanon's population has been displaced from the south to Beirut and within the city.
يعني ما حدا اجى على الباب ولا على الخاطر انه يضربوا بقلب العاصمه بيروت، يعني بتعرفي كل العالم اللي هربت من الجنوب ومن علبة ومن بقيه الضيعه هربت نزلت على بيروت. يعني مش مستنظرين انه يضربوا بهالضربات مثل بقيه الضربات ببيروت مثلا، بس هيدي الضربه كبيره يعني.
Another strike hit a few streets away. Everyone is angry with the Israelis, some also with Hezbollah, others just bewildered.
إجرام منزلنا إجرام هيدا والله بينسوا حرام أطفال هيك منزلنا في كثير هيك كثير بعض ما حسينا إلا خبطة.
The Israeli military has also continued to attack in the south, including firing at soldiers of the UN mission UNIFIL. Israel is trying to force the peacekeepers to withdraw from southern Lebanon because they want free reign.
Countering an attack like this would only increase the conflict. We are not there to do that. Of course, there are rules of engagement, but we also have to be very pragmatic on what could happen if we engage in this fire.
So you're sitting ducks?
We're not sitting ducks. We are just, the mission is not to fight. The mission is to try to find solutions and agreements.
The Israel Defense Force released footage of their chief of staff visiting soldiers in southern Lebanon. He threatened to neutralize Hezbollah if it regrouped in the area.
ואם מישהו יבוא לבנות את הכפרים האלה עוד פעם יגיד לא כדאי לבנות תשתיות טרור כי צה"ל יחריב את הכפר הזה שוב.
Neutralize. That's another military euphemism. It's not just Hezbollah, but an increasing number of Lebanese civilians who know only too well what it means.
Now, those UN peacekeepers, maybe they can't do very much, either to stop the Israelis or to stop Hezbollah, but they are the eyes and ears of the international community, and there is a lot of concern in the UN about them being forced to pull back. Diplomacy, nothing is really moving at the moment. But today, the Iranian president met Vladimir Putin. Now, that is going to worry people in Washington. Russia backs Iran, and the two have a strong military alliance. We're waiting to see what Israel does. We're expecting Israel to attack Iran any time, because Iran attacked Israel 10 days ago and because Iran is Hezbollah's major sponsor. Now, if Iran can rely on Russia for military as well as diplomatic support, well, then we are getting into a very dangerous moment, because the US is not only Israel's ally, the US sees Iran as its major enemy in this region. So I think that we can say it's not just a moment of peril here in Lebanon, it's a moment of peril for the region, and in fact you could say for the world.
Lindsay, thank you very much for that rather grim assessment of the situation. And there will be a fully dubbed version of Lindsay's report on our website shortly. Well, let's speak to the right-hand analyst, Ali Rizk, who joins us also from Beirut. Ali, it's good to have you back on the programme. Just let's start with Lebanon and Hezbollah. Where do all these attacks from the Israelis leave Hezbollah and Hezbollah's future, and where do they leave Lebanon?
Well, regarding where they leave Hezbollah, I think there's no doubt that Hezbollah has been dealt some unprecedented blows, particularly with the assassination of its late leader, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. But I don't think that necessarily means that Hezbollah is down and out. In the last few days, in one day only, the Israelis attempted some ground incursions, and 8 Israeli soldiers were killed in those confrontations. So when it comes to the ground operation, Hezbollah is still proving itself to be a force to be reckoned with. It's actually increased its firepower on Haifa. So I think that Hezbollah hasn't necessarily been set back the way it's being portrayed. Again, it has suffered some very heavy blows, but it remains far from defeated. In fact, there was a press conference for the Hezbollah media spokesman about 3 hours ago, and he explained at length that this is just the beginning in the confrontation which is taking place. Judging from what I see right now, I think we're in for a rather long confrontation. Now, regarding what you said about where this leaves Lebanon, I think, as you showed in your report, the Israelis hit central Beirut, or an area close to central Beirut. It means that they're targeting basically everywhere, indiscriminately bombing Lebanese civilians. And this is not something which is unusual for the Israelis. They've done it time and time again. They did it in Gaza. In 1996, there was the Qana massacre, whereby they bombed Lebanese civilians who had taken shelter in a UN bomb shelter. And now they've taken it to new heights. They're targeting United Nations peacekeeping forces, as you also mentioned in your report. And I think that also raises a lot of suspicions about what Israel intends to do. Does it want to keep the eyes and ears of the international community out in order to commit further excesses and to go ahead with acts that contradict international law, international laws of warfare?
Right. And just briefly, I mean, you heard Lindsay there. She was pretty worried about the prospect of the Iranian president meeting the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and the fact that Russia has skin in the game here, skin in this conflict. Are you as worried as she is?
I think that possibility can't be completely ruled out. I'm not sure how heavily the Russians will intervene. I mean, intervening militarily at a time where the Russians are already engaged in Ukraine, I think that might be a bit difficult. It maybe takes it a bit too far. But the Russians can provide other forms of support, military support. The Iranians have given them military support. And the Russians can provide, weapons possibly, which could come in very handy when it comes to dealing with Israeli airstrikes, diplomatic cover. So there are different forms of support the Russians can provide. But for Russia to get engaged militarily, I think that is a bit far-fetched.
Okay, and just finally and very briefly, do you think that this is the greatest moment of peril that we've seen in this conflict so far since October the 7th?
I think it's correct, it's accurate to say that. As you mentioned in your report, the Israelis are looking into what they're going to strike. And interestingly, the Americans haven't said don't strike Iran. They're speaking about what to hit, what not to hit. And I think that provides a cover for the Israelis to go ahead.
Okay.
There was a statement which I read just before I started this interview from American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who said that the Israelis should quickly go ahead and pursue a diplomatic track. And the American, the Pentagon, the military establishment has been rather vocal in that regard. Is this the start of a somewhat turnaround in the American approach when it comes to how to rein in Israel? We have to wait and see.
Okay. Ali Risk, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. And to find out more why Lebanon is so often the battleground for conflict between Israel and Iran, visit our YouTube channel where you can find in-depth explainers and more at youtube.com/Channel 4 News. Now, in northern Gaza, the Israeli military have been carrying out a third ground offensive, which they say is targeting Hamas militants allegedly hiding in civilian areas. On last night's programme, I spoke on the phone to Palestinian teacher training student Anas Saka. At the time, he was trapped under rubble with his family after his home in the Jabalia refugee camp had been bombed by the IDF. 11 of his family were injured, 2 are dead. Today, they were finally rescued after a week-long ordeal. We caught up with him and his family at the local hospital in northern Gaza, and I should warn you, there are some distressing scenes. 24 hours ago, the Sahir family feared that the pile of rubble that had been their home would now also become their tomb. They were rescued this morning, 6 days after an Israeli airstrike destroyed their house. Today, a miracle of survival in the form of a trip to what's left of the Al-Auda hospital. Not with them, crammed into the back of the ambulance, are Anas's 2 brothers. They were killed in the airstrike. Baba, he cries out, for the father that he'll never know. Injured and traumatized, the family moves to the hospital with a little hope that they have left. Allah looks hollowed out.
There were continuous explosions and we did not know where they were coming from. My husband and his brother were killed. We live in the north and we are civilians. We do not belong to any political party at all. 6 days without food or drink, and we did not turn on any lights or make any noise. We did not mind not eating or drinking. We just wanted safety.
The Sahir family were typical Gaza middle class, quite well off, educated, looking forward to a future. But that was then, and this is now.
Thank God, after suffering and hardship and waiting a whole day, we were able to leave the house. 2 of my brothers were killed, and my brother's wife is suffering from a very serious injury. Thank God, we were able to leave the house to a safer place and receive treatment.
Until a year ago, 26-year-old Anas in the middle was completing a teacher training course. Now, as the adrenaline of survival wears off and the reality of his diminished existence sets in, he might be wondering whether to survive in Gaza today is a curse or a blessing. And tonight, the Doctors Without Borders charity has said that thousands of Palestinians, along with 5 of its staff members, are trapped in the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza, saying that they are fearing for their lives. Israel has not commented on the latest situation there. Well, Christian Lindmeier is the spokesperson for the UN's World Health Organization in Geneva, and he joins me now from there. Christian, it's good to have you on the programme. Now, how bad is the situation in terms of health, especially in northern Gaza, after a year of this conflict?
It's terrible, in one word, or it's catastrophic, actually. And the nasty reality is that we have been declaring or calling this unbearable and catastrophic since nearly already 365 days. So there is nearly no way to maximize this anymore, but it is indeed getting worse and worse, because vast amount of people are being pushed around now or have no way to go anymore because they've been blocked. The Jabalia area has been bombed. The Kamal Adwan hospital is not reachable anymore or out of function. So yes, the basic healthcare functions are not available. Let's not speak even about ambulances trying to reach people, which cannot move on the roads if there are roads where there's no fuel for running the ambulances. So yes, for everything, it's a disaster, and that's the wounded people and the blessed and whatever. But now you have those with regular diseases. There's still people with cancer. There's still mothers giving birth, and there's still dialysis patients.
The Israelis have said repeatedly that they are not trying to limit medical services in the Gaza Strip. They're not trying to target the hospitals. They're not trying to target the patients or the doctors. Is that the way you see it, or is Israel here at fault?
Look, I mean, the colleagues from MSF, the Doctors Without Borders, just reported the same way we see it. There's the narrative that you just paraphrased, basically, and there's the reality on the ground. And it looks like these two things don't match. Yes, the Kogat, the entity of the Israeli forces who's responsible for supplying Gaza, they try to get a lot of material in, but getting stuff across the border, which they count, is one thing. And then you're somewhere in the south of Gaza with material which needs to be offloaded from the trucks that they came in on, and need to be unloaded onto trucks inside Gaza with gas and staff with gas and trucks with gas and fuel, which there is not, and needs to be transported on the roads which are damaged or not existing, which need to be transported to places or shelters or hospitals or healthcare facilities where more than half of them are not functional anymore. So you see the reality of, yes, we deliver, and yes, it gets to reach the people where it needs to be, is a huge difference.
In literally 15 seconds, Christian, is there any place on earth at the moment where the health situation is as bad as in Gaza, or possibly worse even?
Many colleagues have said many times in the recent year they have not seen it. And these are colleagues who have been in the worst scenarios across the world, in the worst humanitarian crisis. They keep saying, we haven't seen things like this. And it seems to be true. It's in terms of medical care and the way for humanitarian care and aid, there's no example for it.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Christian Lindmeier of the World Health Organization, thank you very much for joining us.